My name is Saras, and the day I said yes to my husband, I thought I had found my forever, but I was wrong. Because from the very moment I stepped into his house, I realized I wasn't marrying just him. I was marrying his mother too. She smiled at me in front of the family, her arms open wide, but behind closed doors, those same arms pushed me into silence. She whispered poison into his ears, twisting his love, turning his heart against me. And while I cooked, cleaned, and tried to build a home, she was building walls between us, walls I could not climb. But what she didn't know was that I had a secret I carried in my chest like a hidden blade waiting for the right moment. She thought I was weak, she thought I was broken, but she never realized the quietest woman in the house could also be the most dangerous. And this is the story of how my pain turned into fire and how her victory became her downfall. My name is Sarah, and if you saw me on my wedding day, you would have thought my life was fairy tale. I wore the dress of my dreams. My husband held my hand as though he would never let go, and our families blessed us with words of happiness. I believed in every promise spoken that day. I believed love was enough to build a home. But sometimes the walls you build to protect your love are the same walls that trap you inside someone else's game. When I moved into my husband's house, I told myself this was my new beginning. The house was large, with corridors that echoed with voices and laughter. But to me those echoes quickly turned into whispers, whispers I could never escape. At the center of it all was my mother-in-law. To the world she was a proud, smiling woman who adored her son. But to me, behind closed doors, she was something else entirely. The first signs were small, the way she looked at my cooking with quiet disapproval, the way she corrected the way I dressed too simple, too modern, too dull. She always had a suggestion, a better way, her way. At first I told myself it was normal. After all, I was new and she was experienced. I wanted to win her heart. I smiled when she criticized, and I bit my tongue when she mocked. I thought patience would melt her walls. I was wrong. The first real clash came one evening at dinner. I had spent hours preparing a meal. Rice, curry, vegetables, everything I thought would please her. As we sat down, she lifted her spoon, took one bite, and then put it down with a sigh. My son has eaten better food in his childhood than this, she said loudly, her eyes piercing me. My husband shifted uncomfortably, glancing at me, then at her. He didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. And in that silence, something inside me cracked. That silence became routine. Every time she found fault, he stayed quiet. Every time she raised her voice, his eyes lowered. I was married, but I was alone. I began to feel like a guest in my own home, walking carefully through rooms as though every step might trigger another storm. Yet there were moments when I still hoped things would change. Some nights when he held my hand before sleep, I whispered my fears to him. I told him I felt unwanted, unaccepted. He would kiss my forehead and say, "Give her time, she will come around." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe his mother's coldness was temporary. But the truth was, she wasn't waiting for time to heal anything. She was waiting for time to break me. The house that once looked grand now felt like a prison. Every photograph on the wall reminded me of the family I was struggling to belong to. Every corner of the kitchen reminded me of my failures in her eyes. And every glance from her carried a weight, a message I could never misinterpret. You may be his wife, but this is still my house. It was in those early days that I first tasted what it meant to be invisible. I laughed less, I spoke less, and soon even my husband noticed less. My presence was shrinking, while hers filled every room, and yet even in those moments of despair, I kept one thing hidden deep inside me. My silence was not surrender. It was survival. I was watching, I was waiting, because something told me one day this story would not end the way she imagined. That night, as I lay in bed listening to her footsteps echo through the hallway, I had no idea just how far her power would reach and how much pain she was about to cause. If the first months of my marriage felt like walking on eggshells, the following year felt like stepping barefoot on glass. The cracks between me and my mother-in-law widened into deep wounds, wounds that no apology, no patience, no effort of mine could ever heal. She wasn't just cruel in words. She was calculating. I began to notice how she would whisper to my husband when she thought I wasn't listening. Sometimes her voice was low, filled with sighs of disappointment. Other times it was sharp, accusing. She doesn't respect you. She doesn't know how to take care of a home. Look at the meals. Look at the way she talks. You deserve better. And the worst part, my husband would nod silently, absorbing every poisonous word. I remember one night vividly. We were in the living room with some relatives. The conversation was light, laughter circling the room. Then suddenly my mother-in-law leaned forward and said, "Do you know, before she married my son, she wasn't even considered good enough by her own family." The words cut through me like a knife. Everyone's eyes turned to me, some with pity, some with curiosity. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but my throat locked. My husband, he sat beside me, his hand on his lap, silent once again. His silence felt like betrayal, louder than any insult she threw. That night I cried alone in the bathroom, pressing my fist to my mouth so no one could hear. The tiles were cold under my feet, my reflection in the mirror blurred by tears. I whispered to myself, "Why me? What did I do to deserve this?" But deep inside I knew it wasn't about me. It was about her, her need to control, her hunger to remain the only woman with power in her son's life. Her schemes became bolder. She would deliberately misplace my belongings and then accuse me of being careless. She would intercept phone calls from my family, telling them I was too busy or tired to speak. Slowly, she was cutting me off from everything that reminded me of who I was before this house swallowed me whole. The cruelest betrayal, though, was how she turned my husband against me piece by piece. She fed him stories, half-truths, twisted tales designed to make me look unworthy. And he, the man I trusted with my heart, began to believe her. He started questioning me, doubting me, siding with her in arguments. Each time he chose her silence over my tears. A part of my marriage died. I began to feel like I was disappearing. My laughter vanished, my spirit dimmed, my voice grew softer until it was almost gone, and she loved it. I could see the satisfaction in her eyes each time I lowered my head, each time I walked out of a room in silence. She wanted to erase me, not with violence, but with humiliation. But what she didn't know was that humiliation does something strange to a person. It bends you, but it also teaches you where you break. It teaches you the taste of bitterness, a taste you never forget. And bitterness, Jan, can turn into something dangerous when the heart has no more tears left to give. One night, after yet another public humiliation where she whispered a secret in my husband's ear that made him turn his back on me completely, I stood in the darkness of my room, staring at the walls, and for the first time a thought crept into my mind, not of escape, not of patience, but of revenge. There comes a point in every woman's life when silence begins to suffocate her. For me, that silence wasn't peace, it was a prison. I wore it like chains around my wrists, dragging it into every room of that house. Each morning I woke up before the sun, my body aching, my spirit weaker than the night before. I prepared breakfast with hands that trembled, not because I didn't know how to cook, but because I knew she would be watching. One grain of salt too much, and her sharp tongue would cut me. One dish too cold, and she'd scoff loudly enough for the entire family to hear. Family gatherings became my worst nightmare. Relatives would come, smiling, chatting, filling the house with warmth. But for me it was a stage. She would perform pretending to be the loving, concerned mother-in-law, and I was cast as the failure, the weak, the unworthy. "She tries," she'd say with a smirk, "but she'll learn if my son has the patience to teach her." Laughter would follow, and my cheeks would burn. I smiled through it, but my chest tightened with every passing second. I would often escape to my room afterward, lock the door, and collapse on the floor. My tears would soak into the carpet, my sobs muffled into my sleeve. No one came to check, not my husband, not anyone. It was as though I had become invisible. Nights were the hardest. I would lie in bed beside him, my back to his, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. The distance between us was more than physical. It was a canyon carved by her whispers. I wanted to reach out, to remind him of the love we once shared, but fear held me still. What if he turned away? What if he told her my own husband had become a stranger, and the bed we shared felt colder than any empty room? There were days I thought of leaving. I would picture myself packing a small bag, walking out into the world, breathing freely for the first time in years. But then the thought of my parents, my siblings, and society's cruel eyes would pull me back. She failed. She couldn't handle marriage. That shame, too, would be her victory. And I couldn't give her that satisfaction, so I stayed. I swallowed my pain like bitter medicine, convincing myself that patience was my shield. But patience began to rot inside me. It turned into something darker, something she didn't see. I remember one particular evening. We were at the dining table, the family gathered, plates clinking. She looked at me and said, "You know, Sarah, if you weren't married to my son, I don't think anyone else would have chosen you." The room went silent. My fork froze midway. My husband didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. Everyone chuckled awkwardly, then carried on eating. But I broke, not on the outside. No tears came, no words escaped my lips, but inside something snapped. That night I sat by the window, staring out at the moonlight spilling across the lawn. My face was dry, but my heart was bleeding. I realized something profound. Silence hadn't protected me. It had only given her more power, and if I kept waiting for things to change, I would lose myself completely. As I sat there in the dark, the cold air against my face, I whispered to myself, "This ends now." What she didn't know was that the woman she thought she had broken was about to rise. And when I did, she wouldn't see it coming. That night by the window changed everything. For years I had cried in silence, thinking my tears were proof of my goodness, my patience, my sacrifice. But in truth they were proof of her victory. Every sob, every quiet breakdown behind a locked door had only fed her power. She thrived on my silence. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. If I didn't fight back, I would lose myself forever. And one day I would wake up and not even recognize the woman staring back at me in the mirror. The first spark of anger came with a strange kind of calm. I stopped trembling. My tears dried. My hands no longer shook when I poured her tea or served her food. She noticed it, too. I could see it in her eyes, the way she watched me carefully, as if she sensed something shifting beneath the surface. She didn't know it yet, but the cracks in her control had already begun to show. I started small. I listened more than I spoke. I studied her, her habits, her allies, her weaknesses. She thought I was still the timid daughter-in-law, hiding behind downcast eyes. But inside, I was taking notes. Every cruel comment, every lie whispered to my husband, every manipulative glance at relatives during gatherings, I memorized it all. One afternoon, I overheard her speaking on the phone. She thought I wasn't around, but her voice carried through the thin walls. She was telling one of her friends how useless I was, how she wished her son had married someone worthy. I should have felt crushed. Instead, I smiled to myself. That conversation wasn't just an insult anymore, it was evidence, proof of who she really was, behind the mask she wore in front of the family. The more I saw her, the more I realized she was not invincible. Her cruelty was not strength, it was fear dressed up as authority. She feared losing control, she feared exposure, and those fears became the weapons I began to sharpen. For the first time in years, I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't see a victim. My eyes no longer carried only pain, they carried fire. A quiet fire, yes, but one that was growing hotter each day. I started writing in a diary. Every insult, every humiliation, every scheme of hers, I recorded it all in detail. I even noted dates, times, and what witnesses were present. At first, it was just a release for my pain, but soon it became something more, a map. A plan. My diary wasn't just my confession, it was going to be her undoing. At family dinners, I no longer reacted to her insults. I stayed calm, even smiled. The lack of reaction unsettled her. She thrived on my pain, and without it, she grew restless, more desperate, sharper with her words. But every sharp word only added to the arsenal I was building against her. There was one evening in particular I will never forget. She accused me of ruining my husband's career, saying I distracted him, saying I drained his energy. The words stung, yes, but I didn't let them show. Instead, I looked her straight in the eye for the first time in years and smiled. Not a forced smile, a smile that carried a promise she didn't understand yet. Her face stiffened. She knew something had changed. That night, as she slept in her room, I sat at the kitchen table with my diary open before me. My pen moved quickly across the page, but my mind was faster, sharper, clearer than it had ever been. For years, she had written the script of my life, turning me into her puppet, but now I was holding the pen. And the next chapter I would write would be hers. The day I decided to stop being silent was the day I felt truly alive. My mother-in-law had taken my voice for years, but now every heartbeat in my chest whispered only one word: revenge. Not the kind that destroys blindly, no. Mine would be precise, sharp, and unforgettable. I started with patience. I learned to smile while hiding storms inside. She thought my silence had returned, but this time it wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Every insult she hurled, every scheme she planted against me, I tucked it away like pieces of a puzzle I was building slowly, carefully. My first move was subtle. I began building alliances. The same relatives she used to mock me in front of, I approached quietly, kindly, truthfully. I let them see the real me, the girl she tried so hard to erase. A gentle word here, a quiet tear there. Soon, her carefully painted image of me began to crack. People started questioning her words. Whispers spread, not about me, but about her. Next came my husband. He was the hardest to reach, the most poisoned by her manipulation, but I didn't push. Instead, I began leaving pieces of truth where he could not ignore them. Small notes in his lunch, photos of me at family events where his mother's cruelty slipped through. I let him over here late. Night phone calls with my own family, where I spoke softly of my pain, but never blamed him directly. Guilt is a powerful weapon, and slowly it began to pull him back toward me. But my greatest weapon was her own arrogance. She believed she could never be caught, so I gave her the stage. At a family gathering one Sunday evening, I intentionally served dinner late, knowing it would ignite her fury. And just as I expected, she erupted, her voice sharp, her words venomous. She called me useless, a burden, a mistake. And she did it in front of everyone. But what she didn't know was that my phone, hidden beneath the tablecloth, was recording every word. That night, I listened to the recording over and over. Her cruelty wasn't just my burden anymore, it was evidence. It was the weapon I needed to turn the entire family against her lies. I didn't release it right away. No, I waited. I let her grow bolder, crueler, more reckless. I collected more recordings, more whispers of her schemes, until I had enough to destroy the mask she wore. And then, when the moment was right, I struck. I shared the recordings with the very relatives she loved to impress. I let them hear, in her own voice, the poison she had been feeding for years. I still remember the silence in the room when the recording ended, the way their eyes shifted from her to me, the way she tried to laugh it off, but her voice shook. For the first time, the power shifted. She wasn't the queen of the house anymore. She was exposed, naked in her lies, but I wasn't finished. The next day, I placed my diary on the living room table, the diary where I had documented every insult, every humiliation. And when my husband opened it, his hands trembling as he read, I watched his face change, anger, shame, realization. At last he saw the truth, and that was when I knew the final blow was coming, and it would end everything she built. The diary was the last thread holding my silence together. When I placed it on the living room table, I did it quietly, almost ceremoniously. My hands didn't shake this time. They were steady, certain, unyielding. That evening, as the family gathered, my husband picked it up, thinking it was just a journal. But as his eyes moved across the pages, the weight of years fell onto him. Every insult, every cruel whisper, every scheme she wove, all of it was there, ink on paper, undeniable. I watched his face pale, his hands tremble. Then his eyes lifted to me, and for the first time in years, I saw something I thought I had lost forever: guilt. Not pity, not annoyance, guilt. And then he turned to her. The silence in that room was louder than any scream. My mother-in-law tried to laugh, tried to wave it off as exaggeration. But before she could finish her excuses, I pressed play on my phone. Her own voice filled the room, bitter, cruel, venomous. Words she had spoken so confidently, believing they would never escape the shadows. Now they echoed against the walls of her own home. My husband stood, his fists clenched. Relatives shifted uncomfortably. The woman who once commanded every glance, every decision, now sat cornered, her power crumbling before her very eyes. And here's the twist she never saw coming: the very people she had used as pawns. Her sisters, her cousins, her so-called allies, turned their faces away. None defended her, none supported her. They had heard too much, they had seen too much. Her empire of lies collapsed, not with a bang, but with silence. I didn't scream. I didn't need to. My revenge wasn't fire and chaos, it was truth, laid bare for everyone to see. But justice didn't stop there. My husband, once her greatest shield, now looked at her with disgust. He defended me in front of everyone, his voice loud, his words sharp, and as he spoke, she shrank into her chair, powerless, exposed. That night, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully, no tears, no weight crushing my chest. Just silence, but this time it wasn't prison, it was freedom. The poetic justice was simple. She had spent years trying to silence me, erase me, destroy me. And yet, in the end, she was the one silenced. Her voice, once sharp and cruel, now carried no weight. Her power dissolved into nothing but whispers of shame. As I stood in front of the mirror the next morning, I barely recognized myself. Not the broken woman I had been, not the silent sufferer she molded. No, I saw someone stronger, sharper, freer. And the best part, she never saw it coming. She believed she had won until the very last second. but when the truth finally came out, it swallowed her whole. I learned that revenge doesn't always come with fire or blood. Sometimes the sharpest revenge is letting the truth shine so brightly that the lies can no longer survive. She built her world on cruelty, and I ended it with silence, with proof, with justice. That day my silence ended, and so did her power over me. If you've walked this journey with me till the end, then you already know. Silence is not weakness. It is the sharpest weapon when time... Right, my story is not just mine. It belongs to every woman who has been silenced, cornered, or broken. If you felt my pain, if you saw yourself in my words, then stay with me, because this is only the beginning. More truths, more stories, and more justice are waiting. Don't just watch, stand with me, speak with me, and never let silence bury you again.